Anyone wondering why public trust in government has tanked should review the testimony of Ottawa's city manager at the inquiry into the federal government's use of emergency legislation last winter. Residents and businesses were casualties of almost encyclopedic misjudgments by police, the city, the province and the federal government. Steve Canethlakos detailed a catalogue of bad calls, starting with then Ottawa Police Chief Peter Slowly's initial assessment that the several hundred trucks that arrived on Friday, January 28, would be gone by the following Wednesday. This, despite police receiving notification from local hotels that Freedom Convoy organizers were looking for accommodation for 10 to 15,000 people, possibly until April. It was also well known by that stage that the convoy had raised $5 million to finance a long stay in the capital. Regardless, after Mayor Jim Watson and his staff reviewed the first weekend, they were relatively sanguine. "We all thought it went quite well," Canethlakos told Commission Counsel, in reference to the first weekend. Which is fair comment, if you ignore the urination on the war memorial and people jumping on the tomb of the unknown soldier. After 4 days, there were no terrorist incidents, no deaths, no injuries and no arrests. If they'd left after that weekend, it would have been an insignificant event, he said. We'd have cleaned up the city and then moved on. However, the fateful decision by Ottawa Police Service, OPS, to allow trucks onto Parliament Hill and to let protesters build what Canethlakos called a logistical compound at the city-owned parking lot next to a baseball stadium ended any hopes of a swift conclusion to the protest. Canethlakos clearly subscribes to the belief that, while victory might have many fathers, defeat is an orphan. We, the City of Ottawa, were involved in discussions. But it was not our decision to allow the trucks downtown, he said. The role we played in the entire 3-week period was to support the police. The city manager said he had a good working relationship with Slowly but said, by the second weekend, the police chief was still wondering if he had the legal authority to stop the truckers protesting, given that fundamental freedom is enshrined in the Constitution. Too bad OPS didn't have access to a lawyer who could point to Provision 423(1)(g) of the Criminal Code, the offense of blocking a highway. By that stage, though, the protesters were entrenched and OPS did not have the resources to remove them, even if it had wanted to. Neither was the city enforcing its own bylaws by ticketing protesters or towing their vehicles, for fear that might incite them. Canethlakos said the city owned 2 heavy-duty tow trucks but that staff were very reluctant to participate. The city reached out for help to the federal and provincial governments but was turned down, he said. It also turned to towing companies who were contractually obliged to support the city, but they refused to do so, he said. Canethlakos said the city was not able to take significant action to force the companies to act in the time available. He was not asked if those companies are still employed by the city, but it would be no great surprise if they are. There appears to have been lots of motion but not much action at City Hall. The city declined to declare an emergency on January 31st. Canethlakos said it only gave the city limited extra authority. Yet on February 6, it did so, as a symbolic gesture to convey a sense of urgency to other levels of government. If that was the desired effect, it failed at the provincial level. Sylvia Jones, then Solicitor General in Ontario, made it clear that she saw it as a law enforcement issue that should be dealt with by OPS and the Ontario Provincial Police. Canethlakos said he and Mayor Watson called Jones on February 9 but was told she thought elected officials should not be getting involved in calls with federal ministers Bill Blair and Marco Mendicino. Watson said he wanted the provincial transportation ministry to put pressure on insurance companies underwriting the big rigs, but had received a disappointing answer from the province. Even though they are always setting up blitzes on the 400 series highways to check tires, The province ultimately declined to get involved in using commercial insurance or other regulatory measures to ease the pressure on Ottawa. Watson expressed his frustration in a call with the feds. "The Premier is telling me anything you want, but then there is silence," he said. Back on the enforcement side, nothing much was going right. The OPP, RCMP and OPS fell out over the number of officers they believed were at Slowly's disposal. And the other forces didn't feel the Ottawa Police Chief's operation plan was ready. Tom Curry, Slowly's counsel, put it to Kenneth Lackos that the trucker convoy was an event completely without precedent. He agreed it was, and it's true. But so was the swift collapse of civil authority in the capital of a G7 country. So far, there seems to be more focus by witnesses on assigning blame than on anyone accepting responsibility for this fiasco.